You're listening to Veterans for Recovery, a podcast that unpacks all things recovery within our extended military family. Join your host, retired Major John Donovan, a noted author, lecturer, and person in long-term recovery from substance use disorder, as he and his guests will break down current trending topics and research, along with all things recovery related to increasing recovery resilience and recovery capital within our veteran and service member communities. Now here's your host, Major John Donovan.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Veterans for Recovery. This is a podcast that looks at all things pertaining to our veterans, service members, and their families who are in recovery or seeking recovery. I'm John Donovan, a retired major of the U.S. Army, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. With me today is my guest, Samuel Verdeja, United States Marine Corps. Today, Samuel and I will explore what recovery means and how it impacts our lives. Sam, welcome, and thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you, John, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I am super excited to have you with us. For our listeners, Samuel and I participate in a show that's called What's Going On. We're both narrators in the show, and the show is a Vietnam-themed show that explores that incredible soundtrack of the 60s. In my humble opinion, some of the best music that was ever written in the rock and roll genre. And what we have done is taken live narration from veterans, coupled with video, coupled with still photographs from the 1960s, including photographs and video of things that were going on stateside and on the war front over in Vietnam. And we present that to the audience in a 2-hour concert format. It's part musical theater, it's part concert, and I think in a lot of ways it's cathartic and healing, not just for the audience members, but also for those of us on stage. Now, Samuel, you served with the United States Marine Corps in Vietnam. Can you tell us a little bit about the preparation that you went through in getting ready to go to Vietnam as a young Marine?
You know, John, that is a really interesting question. I think I shared with you that my granddaughter, Stephanie, is doing for a history she's a 7th grader and for a history class, she chose a project about Vietnam War. Why? Because of course she goes to the concerts with me. And one of the questions that she asked of me, she interviewed me. And one of the questions she asked of me is, can you tell me about who you were before you went to Vietnam? And what did you look like? What did it look like? and it really poses a real challenging question for me, because the person I was before I went to Vietnam, average teenager, just graduated from high school, doing what we do best is trying to figure, of course we knew everything by then at that time, at that age, and trying to figure out, well, what's our next step beyond school? A week before, after I turned 18, I received my draft letter. Back then, they were drafting. It was a draft, and I decided I wanted to join the Marine Corps. And what I say in during my narration is that it's true. I had friends of mine who were Marines. They talked me. They didn't talk me. They convinced me to join the Marines because the uniform would make me look cool. But I really wanted to be a stand out, and I joined the Marine Corps, and I was not prepared for it. I have to tell you, I was not prepared because I was going to get drafted anyway to be a Marine, because I had no idea. I just graduated from high school. I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do. And when I got into the Marine Corps, I remember the exact day, John, and I won't get into detail because we don't have enough time. I remember the exact day that I became a Marine. I let go of my label of who I was before I went into the military. And I remember the exact moment that the drill instructor verbally, he was doing his job, not being abusive. He was doing his job, verbally being highly critical and scaring of course, the daylights out of us. We were all just young 18-year-olds. And in my arrogancy, it took me a while to accept being a Marine. But once I got to be a Marine, I got it, and I accepted it. And to this day, I thank him for that. But then the next step happened is that after basic training, special training, and then we went on to Vietnam. And when I got to Vietnam, I have to tell you, of course I was scared. I was never afraid, but I was scared. So I went to three steps: being a civilian, young graduate from high school, joining, being in the Marine Corps boot camp, going through the steps of being a recruit, and then being shipped to Vietnam. Had no idea what Vietnam would. All I knew is for my friends and what the media and the little I knew about Vietnam. And when I got to Vietnam, I have to tell you that in the first month that I was there, I was put into an engagement situation. We were engaged in, and I experienced my first sense of fear. I had never been shot at, never been shot at, and I had never shot at anyone. It became a revelation for me at that point. So that those are my three definitions of the before, during, and after. And there's a lot of history after that, but we can talk more about that.
So you went through this transformative process even before the crucible, where they put the anchor and globe on you at the conclusion. Even before that, there's a moment when the Marine drill sergeant is dressing you down, and kind of the last layers of civilian Samuel Verdeja are shed, and Samuel Verdeja takes on the persona of a United States Marine Corps member.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I remember the moment they stripped us of who we were and remolded us and re-engineered us into Marines. But I remember that moment. That was real challenging for me because in my mind, I left who I was, and I got it. I got what he was telling us. If he was telling us, if you're not listening to what I'm saying, you're not going to come back. You're going to die. And more important, you don't matter what he was saying, but what you're going to do is you're going to get others killed. And that's what got me. He says, you don't matter, but you'll get you can go ahead and get killed, but you'll kill others. And that's what I don't want you to do. And that's what I went to Vietnam with, at least that mind. And then that transformation, I began a whole new role of by definition of who I was becoming.
Yeah. And then, I think that's interesting from the perspective and viewpoint of recovery, because essentially we tell people in recovery the same thing. And that is the behaviors, the attitudes, the lifestyle, the way that you move, the way that you think in addiction, in alcoholism, that mindset is going to get you killed. It's going to get you killed. And you have to take on a new mindset and a new set of behaviors in order to survive. And, it may be not as stark as to get other people killed, but I think there's a few of us who might say, yeah, I probably put some of my friends in danger when I was drinking, whether it was getting behind the wheel of a car or other behavior. So there's an interesting parallel, I think, between the resiliency and the mindset of somebody who is going through, preparing for war, and somebody who's preparing for recovery. Now, that sounds really stark and that sounds really far-fetched, but when you think about it from an attitudinal perspective, when you think about it from a behavioral perspective, I have to shed the layers of the old person, and I have to take on a new set of behaviors, a new way of thinking, in order to survive in life without booze and drugs. What makes? Do you see any parallels like that, Samuel?
Oh, at the moment that I was going through that transformation process, no. But fast forwarding beyond being a civilian, being 18-year-old, being in boot camp, being shipped to Vietnam, the engagements during our missions and so on, that we just did our job, and then we were in the process of transforming, the transformational process. So no, I didn't think about that then. But fast forwarding later, beyond in reintegration process, a word I learned later in life, in the reintegration process. Oh, definitely that we had to figure, we were confused. My mind was confused. And I shared with you, John, I went through a period of drinking, um, and I'm glad I did, because if I had not taken that recovery mindset of redefining who I was, I would have pulled the trigger. I wouldn't be here today. I readily admit that to individuals like yourself that I trust. And
I was speaking.
yeah,
Go ahead, Samuel. Go ahead, finish your thought.
no. I was just going to say that I equate that to two things, two recovery approaches. One, recovery of the trauma that I went through in Vietnam. They would call it post-traumatic stress, and the recovery of realizing that if I didn't stop drinking, that I would either I would die or someone else would die.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was talking to a young man who is in recovery, and he asked for some mentorship, some coaching, and I said, well, I'd like you to go to 3 to 4 recovery meetings a week. And he flinched, and I could tell from his hesitation. He was like, why do I have to go to so many meetings? Why do I have to do this? And it reminded me of a time when we were in basic training, and we all have this person, right? We refer to them as, the weakest link, the person that, they just don't get it. And you're like, oh my gosh, I hope I don't have to share a foxhole with this person because they are going to drag me down. Well, we had a person like that in our platoon. And, the drill sergeant would come in and inspect the room. And, the old thing about, being able to bounce a quarter off the bed. And this guy's rack just looked like dog doo-doo. And the drill sergeant just starts going off on him. And the kid asked him a question. And the question was, well, drill sergeant, why do I have to make my bed? I'm just going to sleep in it tonight. And, for a second, I think we all thought, yeah, why all this insistence on making the bed? But of course, the drill sergeant just went off on him like a insane tiger. And the guy was promptly booted out of boot camp, and we never saw him again. But this idea of the discipline of getting up in the morning, making your bed. There's a great speech that a Navy admiral talked about to a college graduating class about the insistence of his drill sergeants in making the bed. And he said, the first thing in the morning, we would get up and we would make our bed. We would make it to a certain specification. And if everything went wrong during the day, at least I could say that I accomplished one thing, and that was I made my bed. And then at night, I could always get into a fresh, clean bed. And so it was a bookend event. It was like, okay, I did one thing right today, and I get to reap the rewards and benefits of it tonight. Now, you and I were talking about, you didn't see many beds over in Vietnam, did you?
No, I did not. No, I did not.
You saw a lot of foxholes.
Well, like I said, within a month that I was in country, back in the rear, they give you orientation. They assign you to a unit, and you go on patrols, but you're back in the rear, and then they assign you to the unit out in the boonies, and that's where you end up for the time that you spend in Vietnam. And I was with 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, Delta Company, 2nd Platoon.
Hoorah.
And I learned how to sleep in trees, behind a rock, hide in the grass. I learned how to slither like an animal in the terrain, and sleeping on the floor, and rice paddy water, and with bugs crawling over you, and you can't even flinch or blink because there's a patrol going through, and your job is not to engage unless you're fired upon, and so you can't move. So I learned to sleep in different. To this day, John, sometimes people, except my family, because they know me by now, I will sit on something or do something, and I will be ecstatic about the comfort or the luxury of it. I'm thinking back about when I had to dive into a foxhole, or when I had to sleep in a 12-inch deep foxhole by maybe 4 feet, and I'm like maybe 5'9", and I had to slither in there and stay there for protection. You learn how to do that. So I give you an example. When I get into when we rent, my wife and I travel, we rent a hotel room. I want, first of all, I want my own bed has to be extra large. I want to toss and turn, and so the comfort level. Yes, I remember. I still carry that with me. I appreciate having survived. I appreciate every morning. I thank and I count my blessings every night. It's my first breath in the morning, count my blessings. My last breath at night before I close my eyes, I count my blessings. Absolutely. So the bed, the cots you talked about, occasionally we went to the rear for resupplied in between missions or whatever. Yes, but the cots weren't all that comfortable anyway. But yeah, I appreciate beyond and above a lot of people that I'm affiliated with, but they don't understand me. Sometimes they think I'm weird, but it's because the way I go about doing things. And I'll tell you about recovery. You mentioned about recovery. I wake up, I'm recovering every day, every moment. I'm reminding myself, don't look back. Don't go backwards. Keep moving forward. You're lucky to be alive. I'm lucky to have my hands, my fingers, my feet, my head, my body parts. I am just a lucky person. I don't whine. I don't complain. Well, I will whine once in a while, but I don't complain. I will never, ever, ever in my life complain about who I am and the path that I'm on now. My recovery is based on faith. And I'm not a very religious person, but it's based, why did I survive? Why me? I have to have faith in something that's brought me to this point. The reason, well, I won't question the reason why. I just want to know that I will never look back. I will never feel sorry for myself, and I will not allow myself to fall down ever, ever again. So recovery for me is twofold. One, I'm not gonna go back to the drinking I did when I came home from Vietnam to be numb. I'm not going to feel sorry about having the post-traumatic stress, the trauma we went through. And I'm a strong person, John. I'm a very strong person. My values, my morals with my family upbringing, my mom and my dad, a traditional strong man of the family and so on. We are strong, my brothers and I. But that's the only weakness I have, is having to recover from post-traumatic stress and continue on that recovery and never fall back.
No, those are really profound words and full of wisdom and insight, Samuel. There's a writer by the name of Paul, and he once wrote, "When I'm at my weakest, I'm at my strongest." And what he was talking about was being so weak that he allowed the sunlight of the Spirit to come into his place and to lift him up. Sometimes in recovery, we say we don't want to live in the past, nor do we want to shut the door on it, because we will come to see how our experiences can benefit others. And I think from observing you and from observing people in the audience of the What's Going On show, I see that happening. I see there on the nights of the performance, when you get up and you bare your soul, you talk about some things that are difficult, emotionally difficult, and you really do put yourself out there. You're wrestling with your demons, but by wrestling with them, it appears from an observational standpoint that you are slaying them and you are putting them to bed. But there's also an added benefit, and that is the guys and gals who come up to you after the show with tears in their eyes and a look of recognition. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because you have given me permission now to talk about that which I was afraid to talk about. And if you can do it in front of audiences of 200 to 1,000 people, well, then maybe I can start talking about it to my son or daughter or my spouse. And I think we've both heard from the spouses. They come up to us afterwards and they say, oh my gosh, this is the most emotion that he has shown about Vietnam since I've known him. What are your thoughts on that, Sam?
Two things, John. One, when you first asked me to be part of this, it was all new, the concept of music and narration. And I think I did not return your call because I wasn't going to do it because I was not ready to um, expose my demons to anyone else other than selected few. And I think I might have said no, I don't remember. But then we kept talking, and the more we talked, I I I embraced the concept in its entirety of the sharing in collaboration with the music. And it helped me. It has become a part of a healing process for me. And it's even more so when I begin, particularly that one story, that one narration. And you're right, we do have the spirituality of that really touches me because I'm scared sometimes when I go take that first step to go to the microphone and I'm walking into a bunker area setting, and I'm scared, because it takes me back, and I'm actually back in the zone, and I'm with my guys, and for a moment I'm scared. I'm really devastated by that, and that's where the emotion comes in, because I know that I'm there. I'm a realist. I know that I'm walking in as part of my narration, but I'm also in the zone. And then when I come out of it, and when I come out of it, it really hits me hard, because then at the end of the concerts, when the particularly again the wives said, my husband, I never knew that about my husband. He never talked about it. My grandfather, now I understand. And we're having a conversation from a spiritual point of view, it's not so much the words, it's the feeling and the connection of that feeling. And for me, the demons constantly play with me, and it's during that time that the demons come. And I'm not a martial arts guy, but they teach you to deflect, and that's what I do. I deflect, and I don't let the demons in my space. And if they get into my space, I deflect them as much as I can. But those concerts, and particularly the intimate moments with the little, sometimes just a thank you, but it's not so much the words, John, and you know this, it's that feeling, that connection of that spiritual, special, sacred feeling that we share at that moment, even without the words. And that's what's so special about that, helps my recovery, and a reminder for me to say, this is good. I'm glad I'm doing it, and I'm glad that John asked me to do it, and I'm glad to be part of and I say this to the guys constantly. I'm so glad to be, and I'm honored to be. And their response, to go, well, we're honored. Well, I'm honored to be part of the Armadillos. Why? Because this process is part of my recovery. And John, I asked myself that question: where would I be if I weren't here? Meaning the Armadillos and what's going on. What would I be doing? What would I be thinking? This has taken, and I told this to my psychologist. I go, you've been replaced. He goes, really? You want to talk about it? I go, no, you've just been replaced. He goes, well, I go, yes, I'll tell you. He goes, I'm in his band, I'm in his concert. He goes, let's talk. We talked about that. And he goes, that's, and the more I told him, the less he talked. And he listened, and he just, shook his head and went through and he really supported me to continue that. He says, you've been blessed with an opportunity of salvation. I go, what do you mean? I'm telling you, a strategic, I'm more of a strategic analyst. So I approach it from a strategic. I go, what do you mean? He goes, no, you've been blessed. You have an opportunity that many people don't have, many veterans don't have. Your job is to continue to do that, because not only are you affecting veterans, you're affecting the families and the siblings and so on. Anyway, I use the word sacred because that's what I define the conversations and that feeling and that connection we have with the audience. Now, I don't know if you read the email that Stephanie and I were having brunch at Toby's, and on the way home on Sunday, there was a family that walked in, and they were sitting behind. They came in, they all sat behind a big table, big family, and they described in detail, John, each narration that you and Bruce and self, the three in there, and the pictures in the back, and they had a discussion amongst themselves about how it impacted them, and there were some young people there, and I didn't want to interfere, and I just kind of turned around. There were some young people. I was impressed at how attentive the young people were, because they all have veterans. They talked about, oh yeah, my brother was in Iraq, my brother was in Afghanistan, my grandpa was in Vietnam. They were having that sacred discussion amongst themselves. Stephanie and I were just like solemn. And I looked at Stephanie, and she was like absorbing all that. And in that moment, I go, Stephanie has a better understanding of why I do what I do, and who I am as a grandpa and as a person and as a veteran. And her and I had a solemn moment. In fact, on the way home, it took us about a half hour before we spoke, once we got in the car and started, because we were absorbed by all that. That recovery process, my recovery process, is my involvement with the Fabulous Armadillos. And that's what my psychologist was telling me. He goes, you cannot let go. You have to. So, and it stays with me. So
that is so cool. And we've come to the portion of the show where we need to start wrapping it up, Samuel, but allow me for a second to just comment on that. Our pain, our hurt, our trauma, I think we tend to look at it in an isolated sense, that I'm hurting, right? It's my pain, it's my addiction, it's my alcoholism. And we take a look at it as rather insular. And the truth of the matter is, we're like a nuclear reactor. We're like Chernobyl. We are leaking radiation.
Yes.
And our family and our friends around us are impacted, affected by that trauma. Similarly, when we start to heal, that healing radiates also. And our family members start to heal with us. Our friends start to heal with us because they see the change and the transformation within us, and it lifts them up and it inspires them. And we have these moments of connection like you experienced with your granddaughter. Samuel, I'd like to thank you for being with us today. It's been a tremendous conversation, one full of wisdom and insight. I would like to thank you for your service to our country, your service to the United States Marine Corps. I'd like to thank you for your service to veterans and the veteran community in what you've done over the 6 years that you've been with the show, talking to audiences all over Minnesota, sharing your insights, sharing your soul. And you have made us better because you have taken that risk.
Thank you, John. I would do it all over again. And just to close, make a real brief comment. One is that I've relied on other veterans, and I've relied over the years as part of my healing process with my family. And I say this very openly, that those two have saved my life over a period of time in my continued recovery.
Hua. Samuel, thank you. Thank you again for being with us on Veterans for Recovery. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for bearing your soul and sharing your insight. This was a fascinating conversation. To our listeners, thank you for spending a little time with us to learn more about Veterans for Recovery. This has been a podcast of the Coming Home Well Network. Until next time, be well, think well, and do well. This is Major John Donovan signing off.
You've been listening to Veterans for Recovery, a Coming Home Well podcast. We value your feedback. Please be sure to leave a review. Share and download this episode. We thank our veterans and service members for your service to our country. We thank our friends and families for their support. And thank you for listening to Veterans for Recovery.